Hey, what's up? I already messed it up. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Lore Lodge. My name is Aiden Mattis. This is my producer and editor, Aiden Thornbury, and we'd like to welcome you all to our first official podcast. It's absolutely insane that this is even happening for both of us. I mean, 2.5 weeks ago, we were writing scripts for shitty movies in our local cafe. I said don't swear 30 seconds ago, and I already messed it up.
We're trying our best here.
This is new to us, but we're going to be having a good time. Let us know in the chat if there's any technical issues that you guys notice, but we've got a pretty good conversation lined up. Aiden's going to be a surrogate for the audience, so as chats come in, he will be you and you will be him. You will become one in the almighty Lore Lodge. So,
and just so you guys know real quick, there's like a 20-second delay between when your comments come in and what we're actually saying. So if we don't respond to something right away, that's why.
Yes. We're not toxic. We're not gaslighting you. We just didn't see it until 20 seconds after you said it.
The only people we would ever gaslight is each other. Remember that.
Well, I gaslight him regularly. Gaslight, girl boss, gatekeep, car crash.
Hashtag Lore Lodge, hashtag Wendigo, hashtag.
All right, man, we're starting to sound like a morning radio show. That's bad. We don't want that. So anyway, I guess this is a good time to do actual introductions as to who each of us are.
Probably, and how the hell all this happened.
Yeah. So for those of you that are new, my name is Aiden Mattis. I am a master's student at Bangor University in Gwynedd, Wales, but currently living in my apartment in Pennsylvania, United States. I'm a medieval studies student. I plan on being a professor one day in that field. I got into all of this kind of folklore stuff at a younger age. I blame Supernatural Season 1, Episode 2 for me being interested in the Fleshy Boys. But, since then, I've always found this stuff fascinating, and talking about it, I somehow got to a point where I just made a fun video on TikTok about how I think that the national parks are hiding Wendigos from us, and that there was some sort of secret operation there, and Teddy Roosevelt was behind it, and apparently enough people liked that idea, which I do fully believe in. Apparently enough people liked that idea that we now have 250,000 followers on TikTok.
Slightly different.
6,500 subscribers on YouTube. You guys are all awesome. Aiden and I are both absolutely... Our minds have been blown these last few weeks, and you're making our dreams absolutely come true. So that's who we are and who I am. I'll let Aiden introduce himself.
Real quick to Jolie, you should absolutely watch Supernatural.
100%.
He's the one who got me into it. I was turned off of it from I think it was the summer before sophomore year of high school that he showed me it. And going into that, I was like, I don't know. All I've ever seen is like the fandom stuff, and I'm just not sure that show would be my thing. Yeah. And then I watched the pilot, and I was like, all right, I'm in. Fair enough.
A hunting trip.
Yeah.
He has a in a few days.
Yeah, I will own a '67 Impala at some point in my life. I don't care how I get it.
He has been on that train since we were in 10th grade.
It will never end. The train is going full steam ahead, never stopping. I will shovel coal into that fire until I die. Anyway, so... My name is Aiden Thornbury. I am the tech guy on the Discord. I am Director Aiden on TikTok and Instagram, the one who you occasionally see him stitch for behind-the-scenes content and things like that. I went to New York University for film and journalism, and because I was a film student, I still don't have a proper job yet. I'm working on a farm right now.
I employ him.
He does, technically. This has now become my most, successful venture since college. So thank you very much for existing and giving me the purpose again. Feeling great about that. But what else? I'm not that well versed in the whole paranormal, supernatural. The most I know is stuff from the show Supernatural. He's actually done the research. That's why he's the one actually putting out TikToks about all that stuff. If for whatever reason you have a question about that stuff, just don't ask me, because I'm just going to say I'm not the Aiden to ask.
Or ask and then he'll transfer the question to me.
Pretty much,
that also works.
My advice is essentially just go to
just
him.
Ask me.
If you want a question about how to do something film related, I'll try and give you an answer, but I'm still learning because it's very complicated, and even after film school, there's still a lot to learn. But anyway, so that's me. That's all I have to say. I will be eating Oreos throughout the duration of this podcast.
Get some Oreo ASMR in this podcast. That's very nice.
I hope you all are ready for enjoying that.
I hope you enjoy that.
Oh, real quick question for the chat, actually. Let us know how the audio sounds, because this setup, we just got new mics. My old mic was trash. Tried to use it last week, didn't work. This is new. His is new.
I unpacked this off of Amazon Prime approximately 3 hours ago.
Anyway, so yeah, somebody let me know how good, bad, mediocre, adequate the audio sounds. Would love to know, so that way, worst case scenario, next time it might sound a little bit better. Anyway, to you, sir.
All right. So, I mean, the first question, the one that's on everyone's mind, you ever tried DMT?
You know what?
I'm kidding. We're not getting into that.
I was about to go to the quote, and we can't do that yet.
We can't do the quote.
No. Also, thank you, chat, for letting me know it sounds good. Glad to hear it.
Thanks, guys. All right, so first thing I wanted to bring up today, kind of the thing that is the concept that is behind almost everything I've been talking about for the past 2.5 weeks is the Uncanny Valley. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Uncanny Valley is a concept in human psychology where as something begins to look more and more human, we become more and more comfortable with looking at it. But it reaches a certain point at which it looks a little too close to human, but not human enough, and that starts to skeeve us out. That's things like you'll get a little uncomfortable if you see a mannequin in the mall at night. Humanoid robots, things like that. Just that it's almost there, but it doesn't quite fit, and your brain can't categorize it, it can't rationalize it, and so you start to get that prickly sense. Your fight or flight response might go off. And this has been documented with other things that humans are familiar with. For example, the Appalachian not-a-deer. And for those of you who in the chat are definitely going to nail me for my pronunciation of Appalachian, I understand you call it Appalachian when you're from Appalachia, but I grew up saying Appalachia, and I will die on that hill.
We're a little bit east of Appalachia.
A little bit east. But yeah, so the Uncanny Valley, essentially, if you were to look at it as a graph, it just kind of goes back up to human. So corpses are kind of like in the valley, but they're not all the way at the bottom of the valley. At the bottom of the valley is the stuff you see in horror movies. Like if you watched The Nun, the first time you saw The Nun, you probably felt wrong, to say the least. But yeah, so that's kind of where this all stems from, is that we've got, as a species, I don't know what to call it other than the Uncanny Valley, but we've got this spot in our perception of living things, of humanoid things that we're normally comfortable with, where we see it and we have an innate sixth sense saying, you know what, that's not right. That shouldn't look that way. I'm in danger. I should get out of here. And that is what contributes to the kind of thing that I've been talking about with what I've been calling the flesh pedestrian, but obviously also, content warning, I'm about to say a couple of words. The Skinwalker, the Wendigo, the Flesh Gate, the Goat Man, the Dog Man, all these other various creatures, and call them spirits, demons, cryptids, whatever you want. But those things, those all fall within the Uncanny Valley. And I knew I had notes that made sense for this. If you remember my first video, you might remember me saying I don't usually have notes, or I do usually have notes, and this time I don't, but now I do. I've made a point of now always having notes.
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, with the Uncanny Valley, where does that come from? There's a lot of scientific hypotheses. None of these have been proven, but it's kind of like with the Appalachian not deer, the scientific explanation is chronic wasting disease. And chronic wasting disease, while I don't know a ton about it, is a prion disease, and essentially it's kind of like the same deal as Alzheimer's, where your tissue just starts to degenerate and you just slowly waste away. Chronic wasting disease. So that's the explanation for Appalachian not-a-deer. But with not-a-deer, that's not the only thing that they're categorized as. When we talk about not-a-deer, we often are talking about deer that have joints that bend the wrong way, or deer that stand up on 2 legs, or deer that have 4 eyes, or deer that have sharp teeth. So chronic wasting disease might make sense for some of them, but that's not exactly what we're always talking about here. So that's an example of the Uncanny Valley and something that's not human. But why do we have the Uncanny Valley with humans? Aiden, do you have any guesses?
With hang on. With humans specifically?
Yeah, why do humans have an uncanny valley effect? Why are we afraid of things that look almost human?
Well, before you get to what I assume your point would be, I'll come up with a couple options. Essentially, the first thought that I would have is just something that, if you go into the history of the human species and things like that, and elements along the lines of, let's say we're talking about the Homo sapien related ancestors, but that were not actually Homo sapiens, like Homo habilis and things like that, things that were very similar to our species, but slightly different, of a similar playing field skill level to some extent. You could have that element of, okay, they are they are more of a threat in some instances than perhaps a lion or a wolf or things like that. But I want to hear your reasoning.
All right, so you just said one theory. The other theory is that the uncanny valley applies to things that are pale, shallow-eyed, pale-skinned, gaunt, because we are naturally inclined to avoid sick people and corpses. I don't like this one because human beings for the past, thousands of years have been known to care for the dead and also to care for the sick. It's something that makes us human. So the idea that we'd have the uncanny valley built into us to make us avoid sickness doesn't make a ton of sense. And if that is what it is, then we've been actively ignoring it for several thousand years. So from an evolutionary standpoint, it doesn't make a ton of sense. So what else could there be? Well, look at horror movie archetypes when the monster is humanoid. What are you going to see? Think about Nosferatu. You've got pale skin, bald head, sharp teeth, shallow sunken eyes, longer face, claws, too tall, limbs that aren't quite in proportion. And if you think about that, that's a lot of horror movie monsters. That is a lot of scary stories have some or all of those specific traits. And when we're talking about specifically, say, the Wendigo, we're talking about something that is described as gaunt, its desiccated skin hanging from its flesh, its bones protruding, all these disgusting descriptions of the being. But this is something that we're describing something that, that was the way the Algonquin, the Ojibwe described this thing to European scientists and historians in the 1700s and the 1800s, long before we had horror movies.
Can I cut in really quickly?
Yeah.
Two things. One, I'm really proud that you have that whole desiccated skin bit just memorized now. Second, I just wanted to give a shout out to Dusty Papa in the chat. He said, if that's the case, then why am I attracted to my boyfriend? Homie is pale and sickly looking. Loved it. Fantastic. Made me chuckle. Couldn't avoid it. Keep it coming.
Are super chats turned on there?
I don't know yet.
Okay, we're still figuring out the whole YouTube live stream thing. We'll get there eventually.
We'll get there.
If you don't know what super chats are, it's a function where you can essentially pay to have your chat be visible the entire time and show up when we actually look for it. A lot of people who stream on YouTube use it. I just thought it would be a fun thing to add in when we get time, both for your sake and for ours. But yeah, so if you look at horror movie monsters, they almost all have the same general characteristics. And I mean, let's think about what are some things that everyone's scared of. Clowns.
Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of people are scared of clowns.
Can somebody explain to me why anybody ever thought clowns were a good thing to use at a party? Has anybody ever actually enjoyed a clown? I want to know.
I enjoyed a clown last night. Moving swiftly along. Clowns look almost human. They've got pale skin. They've got often shoes that are far too big. They've got gloves that make their hands look far too big. In kind of a silly way, what we're talking about with fear of clowns is still the uncanny valley effect. And what this all goes back to, as far as I'm concerned, and Aiden, cut me off if you think that I'm being if I'm being unrealistic.
Well,
I think there was something back there a long time ago, something that hunted humans, and that through thousands of years and dozens of generations of human existence, we have developed to be afraid of things that look like that, things that have limbs that are too long, skin that is too tightly pulled across its bones, teeth that are too sharp, faces that are too long, eyes that are sunken, not enough hair. Not saying you should be afraid of bald people at all, just like
Shaved.
shaved.
Sometimes it's just
Sometimes
shaved.
it's just shaved.
Sometimes, they're not balding. There's no loss of hair. It's just shaved.
It's just shaved. It's a
Shaved.
it's a stylistic choice. It's what you want to,
It's all for the aesthetic.
You decided you want to look like Jason Statham, and so you did. It had nothing to do with your male pattern baldness and the fact that the last 6 men in your family all went bald.
All I can say to that is,
Aiden's father has great hair.
thankfully he does. Thankfully, or hopefully I will too, but, all I can say to that is, who wouldn't want to look like Jason Statham? I mean, he's pretty cool, dude. He's pretty great.
No, it's fine. It's Pride Month.
Anywho.
Oh, you don't have socks on. Oh, no.
Huh?
It's not homo if you have socks on.
Oh, well, I do have flip-flops on.
I guess that counts.
Yeah.
Can you tell we're both, young men who grew up in the early 2000s? The sense of humor never goes away.
Into the year 3000. We're not doing that. We're not gonna do that. Anyway, moving on. So
Not much has changed, but they lived underwater. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
we're done. Okay.
yeah, that's
Anyway,
that's
as
fine.
I'm talking about the primal fear stuff, so we clearly have something in our genetic memory that has caused it to be that we are afraid of these traits. Now, what could that be? And if you've been following along on TikTok and YouTube, you will know that I believe it is what we have taken to calling the flesh pedestrian. Partially because you're not supposed to say Skinwalker or Wendigo. Those words.
You gotta let me know before you see it. I gotta censor it.
I know,
I'm
okay.
I'm not looking into that.
But yeah, partially because you're technically not supposed to say those things. There's differences in the lore regarding whether or not that actually will attract them and how close you have to be to them to attract them by saying those things. I've said them a lot, and the one thing I can say is I've talked about so many paranormal entities in the past 2 weeks that are summoned with the use of their name that somebody commented on, I forget if it was Discord or TikTok or whatever, but they were like, there's a support group for all the demons you've summoned.
Whoever said that, thank you. Well done.
I can't drown my demons. They're all in Alcoholics Anonymous.
To be, I mean, at least if you do need to take care of that problem, they're all in the same place at least once a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Real quick though, the nice thing though is that you live in quite literally in the middle on the main street of a small town, and you don't go into the woods alone ever.
The woods are... Nobody goes into the woods alone. Well, some people do, but then they go missing, and then we get Missing 411 by David Paulides.
Yeah, please, for the love of God, stop telling people to go into the woods and whistle at night. It's not a good plan, even if there are no such thing as skinwalkers, which we all highly doubt is the case. But nonetheless, if there are creepy men out there who like to kill people, that's a good enough reason to not do it as well. PSA over.
Just a reminder that Ted Bundy would pretend his car broke down to lure in his victims. So
he was also characteristically and just confusingly attractive to some women in the 70s for some reason. And now there's a fan club for it. I don't understand it. I hate it. Anyway, moving on.
I also like to live dangerously.
Anyway.
But yeah, so I've really started using the term flesh pedestrian because these legends do have differences. They do have variations, and the Skinwalker is a witch who uses animal pelts and dark magic to turn into... It's kind of similar to the whole werewolf idea, but uses it to turn into a hybrid animal-human being that has super strength, super speed, can read minds, can move across the astral plane. And then there's the Wendigo, which is either a demonic spirit which can possess people or a psychosis of sorts that overtakes people when they resort to cannibalism and then causes them to crave human flesh and never be satisfied. And in some legends, the lore works that they grow in proportion to the last meal they ate. So you could have a Wendigo that if it survived long enough would hit, 30, 40 feet tall. The Ojibwe described them as being as tall as trees. The Algonquin described them as giants with a heart of ice. yeah, there's a lot of different lore regarding exactly what these creatures are. So rather than get online and say, like, use the term, rather than get online and use the term Wendigo when I'm talking about a Skinwalker, which would of course invite all sorts of criticism and cause more arguments than it would anything else. I use Flesh Pedestrian because it's become my theory that there is something out there, something that lurked in the primal darkness of our ancient minds, and that it has survived in the American wilderness, perhaps also the Siberian wilderness. I don't know a ton about what's going on in Africa, but I'm looking into it if there are any Flesh Pedestrian sightings down there. But so that, just to give people an idea, Flesh Pedestrian at this point is a term that I'm using for something that fits an archetype of cannibalism, super speed, super strength, humanoid figure, fitting those boxes of the desiccated corpse-like appearance, all of those things. And that's, I guess the best way to describe it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does what I said make sense?
I think, yeah, and in addition to that, hang on a minute. In addition to that, I think a fun thing... Oh, you know what? That's probably why I sound echoey.
It also just sounds fun to say Flesh Pedestrian.
It very much does. Guys, let me know if that just, like, made my audio a lot better, because to me it sounds like it did, but we'll figure it out.
Thanks,
anyway,
Chat. We appreciate you.
Yes, we do. Anyway, so another thing to add on the, actual description that he just gave was
Parmesan
that it's
on my Flesh Pedestrian.
Sprinkles of Parmesan.
Parmesan.
It's a very fun term that somebody commented on a video, and now it's just become a thing.
Yeah, I see people saying Flesh Pedestrian on a lot of videos, on TikTok especially, and a lot of the time it'll be somebody who doesn't follow me, and I'll say Wendigo, and they'll comment and like correct me to Flesh Pedestrian, and I'm like, well, I am the one who popularized the use of that word.
Yep.
So it's weird. It's taken on a life of its own, but I can't take credit for coining it because somebody else commented. I just thought it was really funny, and then it kind of took off from there.
It was, in fact, really funny.
It's so funny. I also like Epidermis Stroller.
Yes. We will, by the way, have T-shirts and such coming out
like
with Flesh Pedestrian and a bunch of different... I actually have a buddy of mine from high school, really good at graphic design. He's working on a T-shirt design with Flesh Pedestrian right now. We have another friend who's working on Lore Lodge content in terms of graphic design. We've got a lot of things in the pipeline coming your way.
And almost all of that is going to be available on a store, like an online store. There will be some stuff that's patron exclusive, so if you're interested in any of that, go and subscribe to the Patreon. We've got $1 tiers that just get you in and access to a lot of that content.
Yes.
But yeah, some of that stuff will be patron exclusive. But for the most part, you're going to be looking at just being able to go in the store and buy it.
Yes. Yeah, just a quick thing about Patreon exclusives versus public things, stuff like that. So with the YouTube channel, obviously everything is fair game for everybody. Everything is available to all people, all subscribers, everything like that. Obviously his TikToks are available. So are mine, but those are, whatever. The Discord, fully available to everybody, except there are specific channels for certain levels of Patreon subscribers, and if you get to the highest tier of level rewards, which is Hunters in the Discord, you get access to the Campfire category, which is a text channel and a voice channel that is available to all people of those subscribers, and another one called The Cabin, which is for the highest Patreon subscribers, $10 and up, and those are essentially two specific categories for some exclusive content, specifically conversations with us in those text channels, and more importantly, after every podcast we do, for at least some period of time, we'll be hopping in either the Campfire or the Cabin Discord in the voice chat just to chat with you guys. Feel free to just listen, have your mic muted. We'll be looking, at least one of us will be looking at the text channel, so we'll communicate with you through that as well. But the idea essentially is just that there is something for those who are donating to us, and we're very thankful for that because, as you can see,
pay the rent.
Yes, we have to pay the rent, and also like we're streaming from an iPhone right now. We want to get like
if you could see the streaming setup in here, it's laughable.
Yeah, it's very bare bones. Like we're rocking with. I mean,
what we got.
Yeah, we're rocking with pretty much what we got. We had to buy some things because we didn't have them.
Yeah, like these microphones.
Yeah, these mics were a big thing for us.
Last minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but enough talk. Enough talk. We can. They get the point. We gotta at least finish giving them the content they came for.
That's fair.
The self-promotion can come at the end.
That's fair. I just wanted to let them know if there was something that they might have been expected
last.
from past. No need to rub it. No, I'm kidding. All right,
I know. I just don't want to get too off track.
No, you're good.
Because you got to remember, this is a train, and it's currently very, very derailed. You know that scene in the Polar Express where the train goes onto the ice and it's just like spinning around?
Okay, but that's the best scene in the whole movie.
I know, but that's where my brain is at the moment.
Okay, that's fair. Fair enough. All right, feel free to get back on track. Discord link, I'll drop it in the chat right now.
Yeah, drop the Discord link in the chat. Drop all the links in the chat.
Yeah, why not?
Anyway, so what might have brought about the flesh pedestrians? Could they have been a natural evolution? Possibly. But if so, it wouldn't make a ton of sense that without any known mating habits, they've survived to this day. We don't hear lore about how that happens. We only hear lore about how you can become one through certain means. And while that's certainly possible, the fact that we get similar legends across the world leads me to believe that there's a different origin. And I talked about this in our last Friday video, which is a certain little specific passage in the Bible where they talk about Nephilim. And Nephilim is a term that means those who fall, those who fell. And the rational, common, scholarly belief is that what that meant was that there was a race of, or an ethnic group of human beings who were exceptionally large and would conquer others, would raid others. I think that they were being a bit more literal, and that Nephilim means those who fell, as in those who fell from heaven. And that doesn't have to be the Christian heaven. You got to remember that a lot of these religions back then, at the time that this story would have come about, had generally the same set of deities, very similar creation stories, but supposedly angels were cast out of heaven alongside Lucifer. And in Genesis 6, there's a discussion about how the sons of God had children with the daughters of men. And feel free to disagree with me on this if you're a biblical scholar, but I also am a biblical scholar, so yeah, do with that what you will. This is my theory. I know that there are other interpretations, but my belief is that the flesh pedestrians as we know it are the result of this union. That the giants that are spoken of, the children of these unions, could be possibly, and I'm about to maybe blaspheme here, but could possibly be the Norse gods, the elves, the Tua de Danann, the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, that these mighty men of renown, might be what we know of today as the pantheons of pagan religions. And that their offspring, for example, in the Norse case, Loki had children who were a wolf, a serpent, a giant. In another case where I think that something that lends credence to this is that we have the Anak in Numbers 13, who are mentioned again as Nephilim, as giants. And we also have the Jotnar in Norway and Sweden, who are ice giants. They're not exactly the same thing, but it's similar enough. And then you also have Native American lore about giants. You have tales of giants from the Middle East. You have tales of giants from Africa. You have tales of giants, and to be perfectly honest, you have some stuff that was constructed across the world beyond any known human means. So the Nephilim and their offspring, after Noah's flood, which was supposed to wipe them out, perhaps the ones that survived were the most savage ones. Perhaps they survived by running away into the woods and forests after there were so few of them left that humans could hunt them down. And the ones that survived, if you think about evolution, would be the ones that are the biggest, the baddest, and the meanest. And that would get you what we talk about as the Wendigo, as the Fleshgate, as the more recent, the Rake. Some of these legends that come out of Eastern Europe, out of the dark forests of Ukraine and Russia, of tall, lanky, cannibalistic creatures that roam the wilderness. The Yukon territory and the Algonquin territory in the United States, where we have all of the tales of the Wendigo. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that I am objectively correct about any of this, but I think it's at least an interesting theory, especially when you tie it into, what would have happened. Well, Europe was a violent place. Europe was a place where people would fight over scraps of land. People would fight over being the same religion, but one town having a different patron god than the next town. So it would make sense that these things would not exist or would be sufficiently in hiding in Western Europe so that you wouldn't find them. And then we have Jotnar, and we have the Tuatha De Danann, and we have some of these Eastern spirits. We have the Strigoi, we have the story of the Anunnaki, which I think has been co-opted into something it's not, but I think there's an interesting little tidbit there. If you don't follow the Anunnaki all the way through the Ancient Aliens pathway, you actually get something similar to Nephilim, to what I'm talking about right now. The Greek gods who lived on Mount Olympus, and then when you tie that in with the fact that what you're looking at in Christianity and Judaism is essentially an interdimensional being, a set of beings, the angels, God, the Holy Spirit, all of these things that are present, again, in other religions. I just have a Christian background, so that's why I'm using these references. But if you look at what you've got there, what you're essentially talking about is interdimensional beings, multidimensional space, and then when you conflate that with, say, what the Celts believed, which is that time is a spiral, and you can step in and out of it at Sheaths, at fairy mounds, and you can go into the other world. And when you go into the other world, you have to make sure that you enter at the same time you left, because if you enter at a different time, then you will cease to exist, or you will age very, very rapidly. So there's enough tie-ins when you look at world culture as a whole. If you look at one individual piece, you can easily disprove Norse gods. You can easily disprove Greek gods. You can easily disprove, I was going to say, Chinese religion, but I don't know how you're going to disprove Confucianism, because it's more of a philosophy. Xi Jinping is certainly not some divinely inspired being, so I guess you can disprove it there. But so if you look at any one of them individually, any one structure of belief on its own, it's at least possible to come up with a logical argument as to why, it's not that, it's this scientific explanation for what you're seeing. If you look at all of them, if you look at every single one, you bring together Tuatha De Danann, the Norse pantheon, the Greek pantheon, the Mesopotamian pantheon, the Egyptian pantheon, the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic system of belief, there's enough that it has in common that you have to ask the question, is there something here that we've spent too much time bickering between the little differences in beliefs to miss the whole picture? Are we missing that because we're so set on believing, as Christians we believe there's one God, so there can't possibly be Norse gods? Are we missing that what the Norse called gods, we might have called Nephilim? Are we missing that? Am I making sense?
I think so.
But what does chat think? Chat, am I too big? Am I galaxy brained right now, chat?
Chat, has he done DMT and not told us? I think he has.
Well, that's the other thing. Now that you bring DMT into it, let's discuss that. So I've never done DMT, but here's the thing. People who have done DMT, they talk about having experiences with some sort of divine, some sort of interdimensional beings. And if you look at the story of Moses in the Bible, Moses speaks to a burning bush, and the burning bush is God. Now, the theory is that the burning bush was an acacia bush, and that Moses was just tripping balls. But if instead of saying Moses was tripping balls, we say, wait a second, humans naturally produce DMT. Maybe there was a reason that inhaling that much DMT all at once gave Moses the ability to speak to God. Maybe DMT is a pathway to speaking to whatever is out there, whatever is on a different dimensional plane than ourselves. Maybe you do enough DMT, and when Alex Jones goes on Joe Rogan's show and he's like, Joe, you got DMT and you're going to meet the Clockwork Elves. Maybe he's onto something. I'm not saying Alex Jones was right, but maybe he's onto something with specifically the Clockwork Elves, because I don't know what that means, but it sounds like what I'm talking about.
I was going to say, I have no idea what Clockwork Elves are. Sounds a little what's Clockwork Orange, that movie. That's what I'm thinking
Clockwork
of.
Orange. No, I'm not talking about a Clockwork Orange.
Oh, I know that's not what you're talking about, but when I think of Clockwork Elves, I just think of that movie, but instead of normal-sized people, it's elves doing all of that stuff.
Oh, good God. That would be terrifying.
It would be terrifying, but also hilarious, because if an elf came up to me and tried to beat the shit out of me with a baseball bat, it would probably tickle and I would laugh, and it would be funny.
Oh, boy.
Because at the same time, it's like, you think about it, there's no way an elf would be able to use a full-size baseball bat. So, an elf-size baseball, how big's an elf? Is it, this big? Are they, is it Santa's elves that are just,
We're talking about, Tolkien elves.
Oh, that would suck, because then they'd all hit... So if we're talking Tolkien elves, they could all swing a baseball bat Ryan Howard or Barry Bonds or something. So one hit and my head's 500 yards down the street.
It's actually how the game of golf was invented.
I believe it. The Scottish would be crazy enough
T-ball.
Huh?
T-ball.
That's where it started?
Probably.
Okay, well, you can't make a definitive statement like that and then end it by saying, well, probably.
This is a show about lore.
It is. This is
Real life lore.
Oh my God, what was I saying? Oh,
just
yeah.
went a little venom there.
Yeah, so I got to talk about the Younger Dryas.
Yes.
And then I've got to talk about how this ties in with Missing 411.
Good luck with that. Let's find out to see how he does it.
All right. Tune in to see what happens. Will Aiden's brain break? Possibly.
It's broken. It's broken.
Oh, it's been broken for a long time, boys and girls, ladies and gents.
Just a quick thing. Oh, I'm not sure if Joe M is talking about us or... Oh, no, Native American White Giants. For a second, Joe M, I thought you were saying that we sound like Nephilim. And I was a little concerned because it means two things. One, you've encountered a Nephilim. And two...
He's on to us.
Yes.
What was two going to be?
Yes.
That?
That's better than what I was thinking, probably, so...
Man, that would be cool, being a Nephilim. But
Would
no,
it, though?
I'm not a Nephilim. My mom is Italian and my dad is Italian.
You want to just run that by everybody one more time? Because you certainly don't look Italian.
Oh, yeah, my mom's Italian and my dad is Italian and I look Irish. Also, don't say the words Irish royal family on the internet. Because if you do that, Irish people will get very angry and insist they don't have a royal family. And when you clarify that what you meant was the royal families of the petty kings of Ireland, because there were 54 kingdoms in Ireland at one time, they will insist that that's not a royal family. And then when you say, well, the word royal actually means having the status of a king or queen, they'll say, but that's not the royal family. And you're like, it's not the royal family, but they are royal families. And then the conversation will simply go nowhere, and you'll begin to really not like talking to Irish people.
Which is a shame, because I am very Irish.
I love talking to Irish people. It's
Irish
just,
people are great.
Do not mention the royal family to the Irish. They will get very upset about it, and I did not see that coming. So Ireland, the entire country, I apologize.
Hang on a second. As a Welshman, because he does have some Welsh in him, and he's very
Welsh.
proud of it.
Quite Welsh.
You should understand the Irish dislike of the royal family.
Oh, I do.
Thoroughly.
Oh, 100%. We'll do a cast on the genocide of the Welsh and Irish by the English at some point.
It'll happen eventually.
If you want to hear me talk for 7 hours straight, that's the thing to get me talking about.
Oh, we should have a Patreon some form of goal online to get us to do an 8-hour live stream of him just ranting about the Welsh genocide. Yes, and how much he hates the English. We could make it 24 hours at that point. I guarantee he won't stop talking. There will have to be Jack Daniels involved, though. So...
Oh, God, no. If we're talking about the English, we're getting Jameson involved.
Fair enough.
All
Even
right.
better.
Okay, let me... Younger tries. So, in the Bible, part of the reason God decides to flood the entire planet is that the Nephilim have begun to cause quite a few problems. So he says, you know what? Let's try this again. Let's start over. Noah, get in the boat. Noah's like, there was a lot of animals. God's like, yeah, there are. I made a lot of animals. Nice job, right? Pretty cool, huh? And Noah's like, we're going to need a bigger boat. And God's like, okay, we'll build a boat this big. And he gives him very specific instructions on how to build the boat. But besides that, the point is, God's like, all right, Noah, you got all the animals in the boat? Noah's like, yeah, I got all the animals in the boat. Noah gets all the animals in the boat, and the world floods for 40 days and 40 nights, and then it comes back down. There's still people somehow, but they survive in ways that we don't understand. Anyway, point is, putting aside all of the questions about how Noah fit 2 of every single species in the world into a boat.
Okay, so wait,
and whether or not this is... I'm getting to it.
I have an interesting question before you jump to that. So, think about the fact that you just said that there were other people there somehow. So maybe it was less about every animal in the world 2 by 2, but every animal in his specific area,
Possibly.
Which makes a lot more sense to put them on a boat, especially when it said other people were there. Okay, yeah, sorry.
You know what another idea is?
What's that?
You know Atlantis?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Atlantis.
Oh, yes, I love when he talks about Atlantis.
So, if you're familiar with Atlantis, the idea here is that Atlantis was an antediluvian, which means pre-flood, advanced civilization. What does advanced mean? Well, Plato was calling it advanced, so that means it was more advanced than Athens. A lot of things have been more advanced than Athens, but that's what it meant at the time. So the interesting thing about Atlantis is that, like many things like many cultures, it is the Greek flood story. Atlantis, according to Plato, was a place of great advancement, great knowledge, but also great hubris, out just past the Pillars of Heracles, which we know today is the Straits of Gibraltar. And so, basically what happened was, for their hubris, the gods decided to punish Atlantis by creating a massive flood and sinking Atlantis. When did Plato say this happened? Well, Plato said, about 9,000 years ago. Plato was writing around the year 400 BC. 9,000 years before 400 BC. So let's call it 9,500 years. Something happened. And we know this today as the Younger Dryas period, and we know it today as something that happened about 12,500 to 11,500 years ago, which was a massive glacial melting period where the entire world's sea level rose hundreds of feet. For us to know that with current geological science, with current geology, with people who study this, with modern measurement tools, makes sense. We know what the sea level was at various times in Earth's history. How did Plato know that the world experienced a massive flooding event 9,000 years before he lived? And how did he get that timing spot on? How was he correct? How do scientists today, how are they just figuring out what happened with the Younger Dryas period? And Plato knew about it 400 years before the birth of Christ. Tell me there wasn't a flood.
I mean, just based off of the actual evidence in terms of the historic record, even going beyond the Bible, at least from every conversation I've ever had with you, there had to be some large-scale flooding event that was experienced, at the very least, on a scale that wrapped the modern world at the time, which global.
Where was the modern world back then?
I mean, the Middle East, essentially.
It was very close to the Mediterranean,
Yes.
to the Tigris and the Euphrates,
Yes.
to the Indian Ocean, to the Atlantic. Basically, people were living around bodies of water and didn't live very far inland because, the Romans didn't figure aqueducts out until centuries after Plato. So anybody living near water would have experienced what could be referred to as a global flooding event. A global flooding event would have pushed anything that we had pushed out of our societies, any creature that we were afraid of, deeper and deeper inland. And say that over time, because we do have stories of giants and cyclops and trolls and ogres and all the things that our ancestors supposedly fought in the dark corners of Europe and Africa and Asia. Suppose you look at a place that never really urbanized. A place with vast, untamed forests, unexplored cave systems that go for thousands of miles underground. Think about the geographic landscape of the United States and Canada. If there were something, if the Nephilim did have children who were these monstrous beings who managed to survive the flood, where would they have gone? Where were they most likely to survive? Almost certainly in the caves, mountains, and forests of the one continent on Earth that had seen no urbanization yet. I mean, North America, this is not a knock on the natives, but they did not have a habit of building walled urban cities.
No.
That was something that you saw in Africa, in South America, in Europe, in Asia. You didn't see it in the Americas. If something's out there, it would have thrived pretty well. It would have been known. Clearly, we have the stories of Wendigo and Nalusophilia and the Skinwalker and all of these things. We have their stories. But when might they have started to feel the pressure? When do you think they would have started to feel the pressure, Aiden?
In terms of what?
In terms of human encroachment on their territory.
The natives or the Nephilim?
The bad boys.
Probably the turn of the last century.
Probably around the Industrial Revolution, right?
Correct.
As trains started to crisscross the nation, as we got into cars, as things started to get loud, as our cities started to expand into suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how might they have reacted to that? Well, there's the possibility that they would have fought back, which would explain some very strange stories from the late 1800s about people coming across humanoid bears and all sorts of terrifying monsters on the frontier. But what if the U.S. government, and particularly Theodore Roosevelt, knew of their existence, took it seriously, and rather than risking having people wander into these things, which they had no possible way of categorizing, they didn't know what this was. They couldn't capture one, they couldn't kill one. What if instead they looked at the U.S., said, here's where we hear the most of these reports. let's cordon off these areas, let's monitor them, and let's put our best men in charge of any operation that involves capturing one, killing one, rescuing people who fall into their grips. Would not be beyond the scope of many things the federal government has done. So what I'm saying, in a nutshell, thousands upon thousands of years ago, some fallen angels got it on with some human beings, and that caused the National Park Service to exist.
Is that open-ended, or are you looking for an answer?
Bit open-ended, but I'm curious what you think. You've heard this theory come out of my mouth a dozen times.
So, for those of you in the chat who don't know a ton about my position here, I'm the tech guy, obviously. But also, I'm a little bit more skeptical about the whole paranormal thing and stuff like that. I have not done the research like he had, so I'm just, kind of learning along with you to very much of an extent.
I have many books.
Yes. But essentially, so, I mean, there's, from a totally secular perspective, in the sense of, just science, no further beliefs, anything like that, just history with the limited knowledge that I have, at least in this field. I think there's validity to it, considering he was an avid hunter. He was a big, nature guy, to put it really pedestrianly. Flesh
pedestrianly?
Attaboy. It would not surprise me if, when he was on his extensive hunting trips, if he came across something that he couldn't explain, and that's the reason why he was the one who kind of led that charge. I mean, it's a theory that holds water. I would love to see some proof that we might be able to do at some point with GoPros and walkie-talkies and flare guns and trying to survive in the middle of Yellowstone.
We would absolutely love to do a nice little trip through Yellowstone or something like that with GoPros and somewhat heavily armed. Just see if we could find something about it.
That's the thing, is even beyond anything paranormal, if you're just trekking through Yellowstone for a multi-day trip when you're staying there and all that fun stuff, you got to be prepared, considering there are grizzly bears, there are wolves, there are American buffalo that can yeet you.
There are Americans.
There are Americans, actually, yeah. But yeah, the buffalo can yeet you 15 feet in the air. That doesn't bode well for people.
I'd like to they left their horses at the foot of the pass and climbed up to a small glade where they pitched camp. With some hours of daylight remaining, they went about to set their beaver traps in the stream and returned to camp just as the sun dipped behind the screen of pines. With a shock, they found their lean-to flattened and the contents of their packs scattered among bear-like footprints in the earth. Bowman's companion made a torch from the campfire and peered at the tracks. "Bowman," he said, "that bear has been walking on 2 legs."
That was either a very interesting bear, like Wotek from the... Well, okay, just as a devil's advocate, for some reason when I can't hear
they'll stand on 2 legs, but they won't walk on 2 legs generally. Maybe a few feet, and they'll do that weird
So there's
looking thing.
I will play devil's advocate here only because I really love this story. Wotek, the artillery bear, was a Polish brown bear.
You're talking about a trained bear in World War I,
He wasn't trained. They loved him. He just he hung around while he was a cub, and then he would eat cigarettes and beer, and they were just this guy's great, and they would wrestle with the bear. And so he was just hanging out in World War II with these soldiers. They made him an official, I think he got up to whatever's above private.
Corporal?
Maybe, whatever it was. Because what he would do is he would actually help out the war effort. While these guys were shooting off artillery rounds in these little dug trenches or whatever, the bear, I had to censor myself there, would go over to the truck, pick up these crates of artillery ammunition that would take like 3 to 4 humans to carry and carry it over to the soldiers. Dude, I want to make a movie about that so badly.
I believe you.
That's so cool. But anyway,
May I get back to my story about Teddy Roosevelt?
Aside from a Polish artillery bear, there's not a lot of bears that walk on 2 feet.
Exception, not the rule.
Yes.
Yeah, but so he says, Bowman, that bear is walking on 2 legs. Bowman laughed off this idea, and the 2 trappers soon went to sleep in their repaired camp. But Bowman was awakened in the night by a fetid stench and the fleeting shadow of a great body in the entrance of their shelter. He shot his rifle, and the beast retreated into the forest. Fetid stench.
Yeah.
Fetid.
Yeah.
Smell of rotten meat.
Yeah. We know where that is.
And this is a story that Teddy Roosevelt heard, and to his credit, basically said, I believe the man believed wholeheartedly what he was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what I know about Teddy Roosevelt, that does not sound like the kind of thing that he would simply allow to let go. This is a man who was an avid outdoorsman. He was a hunter. He was considerably progressive in terms of bigger government policies, protecting wildlife, environmentalism. If anyone were to do it, it would be Teddy. And the idea that he would have sent out expeditions to determine where these creatures live and then cordon them off into U.S. national forests in no way seems far-fetched to me.
No, really.
I don't think that's unbelievable at all. And then when you think about how that transcends into today, we have the missing 411 phenomenon. We have men, women, and children who go missing in our national parks, who right out from under the eyes of the people that they are with will just disappear. And it's in situations where it's utterly impossible. Old men who can't walk without a walking stick disappearing and search parties looking in a 20-mile radius and not finding them. Children disappearing and then reappearing up sheer cliff faces that they couldn't possibly have climbed. Hunters just vanishing. And a lot of people say, oh, well, a lot of these disappearances, almost all of them coincide with cave systems, with cave entrances. And if you've never been hiking, if you've never been in a cave, that seems like a reasonable explanation. Oh, they were hiking and they got lost in a cave. The amount of effort that it takes to get yourself into a cave it's not a small amount of effort. And if it were caving expeditions where this were happening, or somebody was like, hey guys, I'm just going to go hop into that cave real quick and see what's down there, their friends wouldn't come back and say, hey, we have no idea where he went. They would say, hey, he went down that cave. Can you look for him? It is not... There are places where there are sinkholes and abandoned unmarked mine shafts where people have fallen in, but those are not the cases that get talked about here. Those are... We're talking about the cases that aren't solved. We're talking about the people who go disappearing and we just don't know what happened to them. Because if somebody disappears and there's an abandoned mine shaft and their body is at the bottom of it, well, we know what happened to that person. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about people who are hunters, soldiers, outdoorsmen who just up and disappear from within their backpacking group in the middle of the day, and they are never found. Their clothes are found sometimes. The weirdest part is when their hiking boots are found just neatly placed together, but we'll talk about that a different time, because I can't get into Missing 411 in one podcast. That's a podcast of its own.
Yeah.
But yeah, point is, there's enough evidence in my mind to support the government cordoning off national parks to prevent people from accidentally wandering into this thing's territory, whatever this thing is, or these things. And when you have the Algonquin, when you have the Navajo, when you have the Iroquois, the Cree, the Choctaw, who all have similar enough stories, I'm not saying they're the same, but similar enough, there's no way that it just was something they all independently made up. It's like the flood story. There's no way that everyone across the world, without talking to each other, made up a flood story. Something happened. And the thing is, for a long time, scientists said, oh, nothing happened. That was just, it was made up. And then, as tends to happen,
which can we just say from
later science proved them wrong.
Can we just say from a scientific standpoint, if multiple cultures say something happened, at least just say maybe, because saying no when there's a lot of people saying yes is generally not a wise decision.
I think we need to clarify that what we're talking about here is science.
Yeah.
And not like everyone else at the party is doing cocaine.
Yeah, no. That's yes, very much.
Just
so.
wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no. Yeah. When there's a large group of different cultures saying, like, I'm not being metaphorical. I mean genuine, actual cultures. Not three of your friends at a party doing a mound of blow, and they're saying everyone's doing it. You should join. Yeah, no, I'm talking like if there are multiple cultures saying that a thing happened in history,
it's at least worth looking into.
Yes, there's at least a chance that, hey, maybe it happened. You should do some scientific research, come up with a hypothesis, test it, figure it out, see if you're right or not, and then move on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have come to the end of what I wanted to discuss with today's podcast. Do you want to take some? Are there any questions in the chat?
Yes, there is one question from Joanne that he's been very adamant about. Don't worry, I told you we'd get there, and we're getting there.
Let's take until 8:30, and we'll answer questions.
Perfect. Yeah, so we're going for another 25 minutes. So Joe is asking, do you think white giants from Native American, mythology and things like that are connected to Nephilim at all?
I don't know a ton about the white giants of Native American mythology. I do know that there are stories of Native peoples, Native heroes fighting gigantic beings who are humanoid. I know that the Wendigo has sometimes been described as being 30 feet tall. And I know that in the Bible you have stories of people fighting giants. I absolutely think it's possible that the Nephilim and the white giants the natives report fighting could have been connected at the very least, if not one and the same thing. I also think there's probably a great degree of exaggeration, as there is with almost any oral tradition. You get down thousands and thousands of years, and something that was 20 feet tall becomes 200 feet tall. But yeah, I think that it's entirely possible that if I'm correct about the Nephilim theory, then I would be in no way shocked if somebody else, not myself, because obviously I don't know what I'm talking about very much on this subject, but if somebody else were to bring me a hypothesis and say, I think that the Nephilim and the white giants are connected, I 100% would be willing to sit and listen and possibly even believe that, given enough textual, scriptural evidence. I mean, you got to remember what I'm talking about here. I don't cite a ton of sources, but I am going based off of a large breadth of knowledge that I already have. So yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know a ton about it, but I would be interested if somebody brought me the evidence to see it.
Perfect. All right, I have 3 questions for you lined up.
Okay.
So the first one is kind of a fun one, and I'm going to answer it before
like
you do.
Saucy fun or like salsa fun or like
salsa fun, I guess, kind of. It's the question is so when we take a trip to Yellowstone, which one of us is going to take one for the team and live stream off the path? And I can tell you right now, it's most likely going to be me if it's not both of us. And I will run screaming into the woods, "Hey, fleshy boys, come get your dinner. I brought seasoning you better enjoy."
Oh, God. And I will be 20 feet behind him with the dragon's breath shells in the shotgun.
Yes.
Prepared to yell, "Get down."
Yes. I will be running, attempting to use a hula hoop while in full sprint. It should make great content.